My grandma left her entire estate to her cat. Now the whole family wants to fight me in court. I'm a 32-year-old woman, and 2 weeks ago, I sat in a lawyer's office expecting to hear the usual, "Oh well, that divided my grandmother's estate among her children and grandchildren." My grandma, Helen, had been eccentric. Yes, she wore silk robes at breakfast and talked to her cat like it was a person, but she was also fiercely protective of me. After my mom died when I was a teenager, she stepped in and raised me like her own. So when the lawyer began reading her will, I thought maybe she'd left me something sentimental, her jewelry, her recipe books, maybe even the house we'd spent so many summers in. Instead, the words that came out of his mouth made my jaw drop. I, Helen Marie, leave my entire estate, including the family home, savings, and assets, to be held in trust for the benefit of my beloved cat, Mr. Whiskers. The room went dead silent. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. My aunt's eyes widened. I let out a nervous laugh, waiting for the punchline. But the lawyer just kept reading. Everything. To the cat. Technically, the will named me executor of the trust. Meaning I was in charge of managing the estate on behalf of the cat. Food, vet bills, comfort, Mr. Whiskers would live like royalty, while the rest of us got nothing. At first, I didn't know whether to cry or burst out laughing. But my relatives weren't laughing. Within minutes, their eyes were on me, sharp, accusing. My uncle muttered, "This has your fingerprints all over it." By the time we left that office, whispers had already turned into threats. They were convinced I had manipulated Grandma into leaving everything to the cat, because I'm the one who's now legally in charge. And now? They're dragging me to court. Over a cat. I can't explain how surreal it felt to walk out of that lawyer's office knowing my grandmother had basically made her cat the richest member of our family. But the tension wasn't just about the will, it was about me. Because as executor of the cat trust, every single one of them believed I'd masterminded the whole thing. The truth? Grandma's obsession with Mr. Whiskers had been years in the making. She adopted him about 7 years ago, right after my grandfather passed. He was the scrappy little gray kitten she found behind the grocery store, and from the second she brought him home, he became her shadow. She'd sit in her rocking chair with him curled in her lap, whispering to him like he understood every word. She called him her companion, her little gentleman. At first, everyone thought it was sweet, an old woman finding comfort in a pet after losing her husband. But over time, it became intense. She cooked for him, salmon, chicken breast, even steak tips, while the rest of us ate casserole. She had a separate bedroom turned into Mr. Whiskers' suite, complete with a canopy bed and silk pillows. She once told me, with a completely straight face, "This cat will outlive all of you ingrates." My family rolled their eyes, but I didn't mind. Honestly, I thought it was quirky, even funny. It made her happy, and after all she'd been through, she deserved that. But to the rest of them? It became a sore point. See, my uncles and aunts always circled Grandma like vultures. They visited on birthdays and holidays, brought cheap flowers, then spent half the time hinting about what she might do with the house one day. I grew up watching their greed drip through every conversation. Meanwhile, I lived with her after my mom died, cooked with her, helped her to bed, drove her to doctor appointments. Not because I was angling for inheritance, because she was my home. But to them, it looked suspicious. The favorite granddaughter. The one always in the house, always whispering with Grandma. They decided long ago that I was being groomed to inherit everything, so when the will revealed that Mr. Whiskers was technically the heir and I was executor, it was like handing them confirmation of their worst suspicions. The ride home after the will reading was brutal. My Aunt Marlene cornered me in the parking lot, her perfume suffocating as she jabbed a finger into my shoulder. "You think you're clever, don't you? Hiding behind the damn cat. Everyone knows you put her up to this." I tried to protest, "Marlene, I didn't even know." But she cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Please. You lived with her. You probably typed the will yourself." My Uncle George chimed in, his face red with fury. "We'll see you in court. That money belongs to family, not a furball." And if you think a judge is going to let you pull this scam, you've got another thing coming. The worst part? I could feel the rest of the family silently agreeing. Even the cousins who barely visited were suddenly full of righteous anger. By the time I got home, I had 10 missed calls and 3 voicemails, all of them from family, all variations of the same theme: "You're stealing from us. You're going to pay." That night, I sat on the couch in Grandma's house, now technically Mr. Whisker's house, staring at the cat curled smugly on his silk pillow. I muttered, "Do you have any idea what kind of mess you've caused?" He meowed loudly, almost like he was laughing. And that's when it hit me: I wasn't just fighting for Grandma's memory. I was about to go to war with my entire family, over a will that left me as the caretaker of a millionaire cat. The first family meeting after the will reading was less of a discussion and more of an ambush. My Uncle George called it, claiming we needed to sort things out civilly before dragging lawyers into it. Against my better judgment, I went. Part of me hoped that if I explained Grandma's wishes clearly, they'd calm down. It was held at George's house, in his stuffy dining room with the chandelier that always rattled when trucks passed outside. The moment I walked in, every head turned toward me like I was the defendant on trial. Marlene sat at the far end, arms crossed, her lips pursed so tightly they looked like they'd vanish. My cousins whispered to each other, shooting me dirty looks, and George banged the table like he was calling court to order. "All right," he said, glaring at me. "Let's cut to the chase. We all know that ridiculous will wasn't Grandma's idea." "Yes, it was," I replied, my voice shaking but firm. "She loved Mr. Whiskers. She wanted him taken care of. And she trusted me to make sure that happened." Marlene scoffed. "Don't insult us. You're telling me a grown woman thought it was better to give a house and a 6-figure bank account to a cat than to her own children? Please." She was manipulated, and we all know by who. The accusations flew fast. My cousin Derek slammed his fist on the table. "You lived with her, you had access to her documents, her computer. You probably typed the damn will up yourself." "That's not how wills work," I shot back. "There were lawyers, witnesses." "Witnesses you probably paid off," Marlene sneered. The fury in the room was so thick it felt like the air itself was against me. George leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. "Here's how this is going to go. You sign over control of the estate to us. We'll take care of the cat, don't worry, we'll toss him kibble, and you walk away with a little cut. Nobody has to know you pulled this stunt." I stared at him, horrified. "You want me to sell out Grandma's last wishes? For cash?" "Don't be naive," he growled. "Courts don't uphold garbage like this. Pets aren't heirs. Once we challenge it, you'll lose everything. You think a judge is going to hand over property to a furball? No. So be smart. Take what you can now before you end up with nothing." For a moment, the room spun. The pressure was suffocating, every set of eyes boring into me, waiting for me to break. But then I remembered Grandma's voice, soft but sharp, the way she always said, "Don't let them bully you. They've always been circling like vultures." I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm not signing anything. If you want to fight, we'll fight. But Grandma trusted me. And I'm not betraying her for you." Marlene shot up, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Then you're going to regret this. Don't think you can hide behind that damn cat forever. We'll drag you through court until you're broken. You'll wish you'd never even been born." Her words rang in my ears all the way home. That night, back in Grandma's house, I locked every door and window. I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just threatening lawsuits, they were threatening me. Mr. Whiskers curled up in my lap, purring like none of this mattered, while I sat trembling, wondering how far my own family would go to strip me of everything. And then, just after midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Grandma's headstone. And underneath, the words, "She's rolling in her grave because of you." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was war. When I showed my lawyer the photo of Grandma's headstone with that threat written underneath, he frowned, tapping his pen against the desk. This is intimidation. They're trying to scare you into backing down. Scare me? I whispered. They're making me feel like I'm living in a horror movie. He nodded calmly. And that's exactly their goal. But here's the thing, intimidation usually means desperation. They're bluffing, and it tells me they don't have a strong legal case. I wanted to believe him, but then the court filings arrived. Thick envelopes stuffed with accusations, undue influence, fraudulent manipulation, elder abuse. They painted me as a conniving granddaughter who preyed on a vulnerable old woman to funnel her estate into my own pockets under the guise of caring for a cat. I sat at my kitchen table, reading line after line of lies, tears dripping onto the papers. According to them, I wasn't a caretaker. I was a predator. But the public smear campaign was worse. Within days, Marlene and George had posted on Facebook, claiming I had stolen their inheritance and brainwashed Grandma into writing a nonsense will. Old family friends messaged me, asking if it was true. Even neighbors who'd known Grandma for decades looked at me differently. I felt like my world was collapsing, and all I had was a cat. But then, my lawyer called me in with something that changed everything. He had gone through a box of Grandma's personal letters, the ones she had left with the law firm for safekeeping. And inside, he found proof that silenced my doubts. One letter, dated 6 months before her death, was addressed to me. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, neat, slanted cursive that carried her voice straight into my chest. My dearest girl, it read, you know better than anyone how this family has treated me over the years. To them, I've been a bank account, not a mother, not a grandmother. They've asked, demanded, even begged, but rarely cared. You, though, you cared. You sat with me when I was sick. You cooked with me. You made me laugh when I thought I had nothing left to smile about. That's why I'm leaving everything to Mr. Whiskers and placing you as executor. Not because I trust the cat, of course, but because I trust you. I know they'll fight you. I know they'll say you manipulated me. But you mustn't let them. You must stand firm. This is my last wish, and I want you to honor it. Love always, Grandma. I clutched that letter to my chest, sobbing. For weeks I'd felt like maybe they were right, maybe this was too crazy, maybe I was fighting a losing battle. But there it was, in her own hand, proof that this was her choice, not mine. When I showed it to my lawyer, he smiled grimly. This is gold. Not only does it prove intent, it shows she anticipated their backlash. It's going to be hard for them to argue she wasn't of sound mind when she was this deliberate. But the family didn't back off. If anything, they doubled down. At the first hearing, Marlene showed up in black, as if she was attending another funeral, sobbing dramatically about how her mother's mind was gone and how I had isolated her from her true family. George nodded along solemnly, glaring at me like I was a criminal. And then they unveiled their witness, a neighbor who claimed I rarely visited Grandma in her final months, leaving her lonely and confused. My heart sank, until my lawyer stood and pulled out Grandma's medical records, showing dozens of appointments I had personally driven her to, along with receipts of the groceries I bought every week. He even had text messages where Grandma thanked me for dinner. The judge leaned forward, unimpressed with their neighbor's testimony. Marlene's act faltered. Still, I knew this was only the beginning. Back at Grandma's house that night, I sat with Mr. Whiskers in my lap, his purring vibrating against my chest. I whispered, you have no idea what they're willing to do to take this from us. Because deep down, I knew the court battle wasn't the only danger. They hated me enough to send threatening photos. They hated me enough to lie in front of a judge. And I was starting to wonder, how far would they go before this ended? If the court filings and Facebook smear campaign weren't enough, what happened next proved my relatives weren't just angry, they were dangerous. 2 nights after the first hearing, I came home to find the front gate to Grandma's property hanging open. I knew I'd latched it that morning. My chest tightened as I walked up the drive. The porch light was off, though I never left it that way. And then I saw it, spray paint across the garage door in big red letters, thief. I froze. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped my keys. Whoever did this hadn't just wanted to scare me, they wanted the whole neighborhood to believe their version of the story. I rushed inside, calling for Mr. Whiskers, my heart pounding. He came trotting out from the kitchen, tail high, completely oblivious to the war raging outside. Relief flooded me, but it was mixed with terror. If they were willing to vandalize the house, what was stopping them from hurting the cat? The next morning, I filed a police report. The officer was sympathetic but non-committal. Family disputes over wills get ugly. Document everything. Install cameras if you can. That's exactly what I did. I bought motion sensor cameras for every corner of the property. If they wanted to intimidate me again, I'd have proof. But the harassment didn't stop. One afternoon, a brick wrapped in newspaper landed on the porch with a thud. Inside the paper, someone had scrawled, "Drop the trust or you'll be next." Another time, I caught Marlene parked across the street in her car, watching the house. When I confronted her, she just smirked and drove off. The stress was eating me alive. I barely slept. Every creak in the floorboards made me jump, and yet, in the middle of this nightmare, my lawyer discovered something that changed everything. While combing through Grandma's safe deposit box, he found another sealed envelope labeled "For Court, if needed." Inside was a handwritten addendum to her will, signed and notarized just 3 months before her death. It said, in plain language, "To my children and extended family, you are not entitled to my estate. You've treated me like a burden, not a mother. My only concern is that my cat be cared for, and I trust my granddaughter to honor that. If you try to fight this, know that you are proving me right. This is my choice, made of sound mind and with no outside influence." Reading those words, I sobbed until my throat burned. Grandma hadn't just left me the trust, she had anticipated the exact ugliness unfolding now. She knew they'd come after me. And she had left me one last shield. When my lawyer revealed the addendum in court, the effect was devastating. The judge read it twice, then looked over at Marlene and George with thinly veiled disdain. "This is about as clear as it gets," the judge said. "Your mother made her wishes known repeatedly. You may not like them, but that doesn't make them invalid." Still, my family didn't back down. George slammed his hand on the table, shouting, "She wasn't in her right mind. She was lonely. Manipulated." But the judge only frowned and said, "I see no evidence of that here. What I see is a deliberate woman making deliberate choices." Outside the courtroom, Marlene hissed at me, her eyes sharp with venom. "You think you've won? This isn't over. We'll make sure you regret ever crossing us." That night, as I sat with Mr. Whiskers curled against me, I finally admitted something to myself. This wasn't about Grandma anymore. This was about control. About greed. About family members so consumed by money they would rather destroy me than accept her last wishes. And I couldn't help but wonder, if they couldn't win in court, what would they try next? The final showdown in court felt like the culmination of years of resentment, not just months of legal filings. By the time we got there, my uncles, aunts, and cousins had turned the trial into a public circus. They came dressed in black as if mourning, whispering dramatically to anyone who would listen about how I had stolen the family legacy and twisted Grandma's mind in her final years. I walked in with my lawyer and a folder full of Grandma's letters, recordings, and documents. My hands shook, but I held my head high. I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for Grandma's voice, for the truth she left behind. The proceedings dragged for hours. George's attorney argued that Grandma had been eccentric, unstable, and vulnerable in her last years. He called Marlene to the stand, and she wept into tissues, claiming I isolated Grandma from her own children. "She barely saw us anymore," Marlene cried. "Our mother was manipulated into leaving everything to a cat. It's cruel. She didn't know what she was signing." I wanted to scream. Didn't know what she was signing? Grandma had drafted 3 separate versions of the will, all with lawyers present. She knew exactly what she was doing. My lawyer stood, calm but fierce. Your Honor, eccentricity is not incompetence. Loving a cat more than ungrateful children might be unusual, but it is not irrational. And the documents speak for themselves. Then came the moment that turned everything. He pulled out the notarized addendum we'd found in Grandma's deposit box, along with the private letter she wrote to me. He read her words aloud, her handwriting projected on a screen for everyone to see. You are not entitled to my estate. You've treated me like a burden, not a mother. My only concern is that my cat be cared for, and I trust my granddaughter to honor that. If you try to fight this, know that you are proving me right. The courtroom went silent. You could hear a pin drop. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable but sharp. This is not the language of a manipulated woman. This is deliberate, pointed, and utterly clear. She anticipated this exact scenario. This court sees no reason to invalidate the will. Marlene gasped. George cursed under his breath. My cousins whispered furiously, their faces twisted in disbelief. And then, the gavel came down. The estate will remain in trust for the benefit of the pet, Mr. Whiskers, with the granddaughter as executor. Case dismissed. It was over. Just like that. But outside the courthouse, the ugliness spilled out again. George stormed up to me, his face red, spittle flying as he shouted, "You'll pay for this. You'll be alone forever, you hear me? Alone." Marlene sneered, her voice low and venomous. Enjoy living with your cat. Don't come crawling to us when you realize you've lost your entire family. I didn't even answer. I just walked away, clutching my lawyer's arm, my chest heaving with a mixture of relief and grief. Because the truth was, they were right about one thing, I had lost my family. But not because of the will. Because of what they revealed about themselves. Their greed, their cruelty, their willingness to destroy me just for a share of money that Grandma never wanted them to have. In the weeks that followed, I cut all contact, blocked numbers, deleted social media, moved Grandma's money into secure accounts for the trust. Mr. Whiskers and I settled into the big, quiet house together. Sometimes it feels empty, too big for just me and a cat. But every time I read Grandma's letters, I'm reminded that she chose me. One evening, as Mr. Whiskers purred on my lap, I whispered aloud, "You're not just a cat, you're her last word. Her final rebellion." And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I hadn't lost a family. I'd uncovered the truth about them. Grandma saw it all before anyone else did. She knew they were vultures. And she made sure, even after death, that they'd never sink their claws into her legacy. Now, it's my duty to carry that legacy forward, not for me, but for her. And for a gray cat who, without meaning to, exposed the true face of everyone around us.
Follow me for more stories.